Hey everybody, welcome back to the Explore the Road podcast. This is going to be part 2 of my conversation with Patrick, and we'll be picking up right where we left off in the last episode. Welcome back.
Yeah, it was, I had seen a lot of killer whales. I worked on the Blue Planet 2 sequence. I worked on the Hostile Planet sequence. I'd seen a lot of killer whale footage. But that sequence, I think, was the best one. That really stood out as, doing it at night, doing it around the vessels, got really good behavior. It was hard, right? That was not an easy shoot to be on.
No, it was not hard. I mean, that shoot, we got there and, we were in one location and the herring decided to go into the neighbouring fjord, which wasn't a big issue for us initially because we just had a boat. We'll take the boat around the corner and around the headland and we'll go into that fjord. And then we got this weather report. I think we'd been there for, 2 days? And we realised that this huge storm was going to hit. And if we stayed in the bay that we were currently in, the weather would be too rough for the boat size that we had to be able to make it around that headland every day.
Yeah.
And so we had to make a split decision to relocate to an island in that neighbouring fjord.
Yeah.
Last minute, got all the kit out of the hotel. The captain took the boat round before the storm hit. We all drove round. I think we were doing it in the middle of the night or something, weren't we? We then got picked up.
An island with only a few houses.
Yeah.
So where do we stay?
Yeah, literally, we stayed, and it was the mayor.
At Roy's house.
Yeah, Roy's house.
Yeah.
He put us up in one of his places, and then we got to the island in that fjord, thinking, okay, we're in the fjord, and the weather was still so rough, we couldn't film.
Yeah, we lost several days.
Yeah, we lost several days, and we ended up getting extended, and even extending the shoot was a bit of a risk because I remember being on the phone to my producer, who was a series producer at that show, Bill, and he was like, if we extend, can we get it? And it was...
What do you say? I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. It was, the killer whales are here.
Yeah.
The boats that are happy for us to go in the water because, Netflix program, obviously we had a lot more safety hoops to jump through at the time. But, the boats that are happy with us being in the water whilst they're fishing are here. The weather is supposedly going to be stable. It's a bit of a gamble, but you make the call, man. You're the boss.
Yeah.
And he did. He gave us the extension, and we got really lucky. We nailed it in that second week. And for me, actually, it was one of the scariest shoots. I wasn't even in the water, but it was the first time I'd been exposed to anything like that, particularly seeing an animal of that size in the dark, in the cold. The whole scenario was so intense for me, and watching you and Mark in the water and seeing this huge dorsal fin, appearing
2 meters high. Yeah.
2 meters high, and obviously we can see in the water. So the fishing boats they capture all the fish. Then they pull the nets really tight. Then they shine these huge lights into the water so we can see what's going on in this small area in front of us. And you guys are in the water, and I can see these killer whales moving around you, these 2 huge males. But what you can't see on the film, and what you can't, and we could only see with our eyes, is that you had the whole pod, charging around the outside, moving so quickly. It was such an intense thing, and that was just me looking at you guys in the water, let alone being in there. How does it feel to be with an animal like that in the dark? There's one thing to be in the water with them, but then to, make that transfer to being in the pitch black with an animal that is dark, that is so curious and powerful. How does that compare?
Well, and part of the reason that shoot was hard, I'd been on some shoots in Norway before, and, they're generally not that taxing because there's only 4 or 5 hours of daylight. So you're like, well, we can only be out there so many hours because it's going to get dark. The problem is when you do a show that's based on being out at night, you got 20 hours of darkness. You can work all the time. It's very short downtime. And you just got to be ready when those boats go out and fish, which, we were. Mm-hmm. But Yeah, it's scary, when you get down there and you know because things just come out of nowhere, like the fin whale did in the first encounter I ever
Hmm.
had with one, which is scary. When you see something small from far away coming,
Hmm.
you can prepare for it, you see it, you know where it is. But when you look around and something just appears from, and because they were killing so many herring and the fishing boat was fishing, the visibility was much lower.
Hmm.
It's dark, there's scales, there's blood, there's guts, there's stuff all over the place. So the visibility isn't amazing. And then, yeah, these big apex predators come from 5 meters away right past you. You're like, whoa, whoa. Mark did an amazing job, staying calm, filming steady. I got some nice shots of him filming the whales. The whole thing was pretty spectacular. But yeah, it's a whole different level when it's at night. And it's a whole different level when you involve things like a big uh, herring purse seiner that you don't have control over. They've got hooks and ropes and nets and moving parts and bow thrusters and a big prop. There's just a lot happening that can cause a problem. I remember I cut my finger in half long ways with a drone prop a few years prior to that in Norway. And they have this hospital vessel that spends its time near the fishing fleet. So we called them. Oh my gosh. And I didn't know how bad it was. There's blood everywhere. It's all hamburger looking. And we called this vessel the hospital vessel that's there for the fishing fleet. Hey, I heard the captain. Hey, my friend cut his finger off. Can we come? He's got to get some. He's bleeding all over. And I could hear the guy on the other end of the radio. He did what? Yeah, he cut his finger off. His finger? You can make it to shore and go to the hospital. Sorry. And he hung up. That just gives you a sense of
Wow.
like the risk that these fishermen are taking all the time and how dangerous situation. They've got a hospital boat out there all the time in case somebody gets their arm ripped off in a crank or gets yanked over the side and he needs to be resuscitated because he's been underwater in the freezing water. When they put a fairly permanent hospital boat with the fleet all the time that bad things can happen and sometimes do happen.
Mm.
So, having that huge purse seiner there doing active fishing and cranks and nets and posts and rails and props, it's scary.
Yeah, I mean, because seeing them in real life is one thing, because it doesn't matter how many times I think you see something on TV or see a book or a picture. Um, Seeing an animal like that in real life is always just awe-inspiring. They are massive. Nothing
Mm.
can really prepare you for that. Um, and when you are in that scenario all the time, do you think that feeling of awe, does that ever fade away a little bit?
Uh, the nice thing is there's every encounter is so different, and I don't want to belittle sharks because they're amazing, but I've done some stuff with great white sharks, well, so lots of different sharks, but my experience with great whites at Guadalupe, for example, you put a bunch of blood in the water, the sharks come.
Hmm.
You can go down. You can film the shark in an hour from above, below, the side, underneath, upside down, right side, and then you're like, well, we've got another 7 hours today and then another 5 days. And, for me, the sort of awe and wonder wears off partly because it's easy comparatively. You just dump a bunch of blood in, they come, and they'll stay as long as you're putting blood in. So with whales, that's not the case, and you can see the intelligence in their eyes. And so every encounter to me feels different. They do different things, they behave in different ways. I'm looking at them trying to understand what they're thinking and what they're doing and why. And you get a real sense from the intelligence in those eyes that they're doing the same to you. And so it makes every encounter different and unique and special. And you'll think, oh, here's a calf. I'm going to go in. And you go in, and then the calf sees you. Then it goes away, and then it comes back with its mom to show you to its mom. Mom, look at this thing I found. Every encounter is so different for me when it comes to whales. So, is it scary anymore? Probably not. Do I miss a little bit of that sort of shock and wonder? I suppose I probably do. Yeah. Do I yearn a little bit for the first couple of times again? Yeah, sometimes. Is it as special as that fin whale scaring the crap out of me, or that first time I went in the cold fjord in Cloudfjord in 2012 or whatever that was with killer whales? Some of that wears off over time, unfortunately, I think. But yeah, that's just kind of the I guess in some ways maybe I should be happy with that, to feel like I've achieved a certain level of comfort with the animals. So yeah, I think that's how I'll frame it. I think I'll view it as a good thing.
Well, I mean, you have been. How many times do you know how many dives you've done?
No, thousands, with
Thousands.
different whales. Yeah, because some years I'm out 200 days, and you might do 10 encounters a day on a good day. It adds up over time, and I've been at it now 15 years probably. So yeah, a lot, a lot.
And you've recently come back from a couple months promoting your new film on PBS.
Yeah, yeah. Patrick and the Whale is out. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So that was made by Terramata Factual Studios, which is a subsidiary of Red Bull. Executive produced by James Reed, my friend who made my show on Discovery Channel, Chasing Ocean Giants, and then he went on to make My Octopus Teacher. Won an Oscar for that one.
Not too shabby.
And Mark Fletcher, who's done a lot of work with Howard Hall. So that one got sold differently in different markets. When I did Chasing Ocean Giants, it was very clear from the beginning. This is paid for by Discovery Channel, and it's going on Discovery Channel as an 8-part series worldwide. Done. With Patrick and the Whale, that's a film, and Terramata sold it to different parties in different jurisdictions. So it's been, but which has been kind of fun for me. So it got a cinematic release in Austria and the Netherlands, and coming up it'll have a cinematic release in Japan. So that's fun. When you go to movie theaters and people are buying tickets, there's film festivals, which are fun as well, but when it's getting a proper cinematic release, it's so surreal to walk into a normal movie theater like in a mall and see, Barbie, Oppenheimer, Patrick and the Whale. These other, man, people are paying to see your show. A film festival, you might buy a week pass and you can see or not see a bunch of shows, but it's different when it's properly in real cinemas. So right now it's in 42 cinemas in the Netherlands. It was in a similar number across Austria last year. It'll be released in Japan. In the US, PBS put it out on PBS Nature, and now it's on Amazon Prime. So if you're in the US or I think Mexico or Canada, you can get it on Amazon Prime anytime. Yeah, it's been fun. And so part of the promotional tour has had me running around to different places. I just came back last week from the Netherlands. I went to five different cities in the Netherlands and did Q&As at different cinemas. I get lots of nice messages from Dutch people. Looking forward to the Japanese release and getting to travel around Japan for a bit and meet with people there as well. So no, it's been cool.
Well, I've been lucky enough to watch the film, and it's absolutely awesome. And for me, you were just mentioning then about how the whales, they see you and they're interacting with you, and that's what this film, is about. Your interaction with a specific sperm whale, two groups. And for those of the people out there that don't know what a sperm whale looks like, how does a sperm whale differ from your blue whale or your killer whale?
Yeah, so this is the classic Moby Dick, right? Now they have both of them, but the first emoji of a whale was a sperm whale. The kid's bathtub toy is a sperm whale. You don't know it, but it's the shape of a sperm whale. It's not the shape of a blue whale or a humpback whale. It's usually the shape of a sperm whale. And so, yeah, it is the quintessential classic whale shape. This big, flat, square head, teeth, big jaw full of teeth on the bottom. It's the biggest toothed animal in the world. It's the biggest, it's the biggest active predator in the world. Baleen whales hunt as well, but they eat krill and passive things, whereas sperm whales will go hunt fish, giant squid, diamondback squid, that kind of thing. So yeah, they're pretty awe-inspiring, and they're huge. They're much, much bigger than killer whales. Not quite a blue whale size, but really, really massive animals. Yeah, so it's cool. And they have the biggest brain of any animal on Earth, so they're also incredibly intelligent.
And you had an interaction with a particular whale. What was her name, and what was the interaction?
Yeah, that was with the first time was with our friend Mark Sharman, actually, in 2019. So yeah, I was swimming along looking for some whales, found a very curious whale. All the other whales in her family went down to feed. She stayed on the surface with me and just rolled around and played and came back and hung out. And we saw her a couple of times during that week. And then I think she got to know me a little bit, because when I went back the next year in 2020, she would avoid the people I had with me and come over to me and lift me up on her head and roll around. And so I would play with her, I would roll, and then she would roll, and we'd do these little dances. And that happened, 5 or 6 times over that month. I would see her about once a week and her family, and she would do the same type of behavior. She would literally avoid other people in the water and come over to me. I'd like to think it's because she likes me. I'm going to pretend that's the case. It might be familiarity. It could be simply, I don't know these things, but I know that thing, and I'm going to go to that thing. So it could be as simple as just being familiar, but she would seek me out and come over and play and lift me up and do this little dance. It was really, yeah, it was quite spectacular.
I mean, you say that, I've got to say, you say that very casually, that the whale comes and lifts you up, What do you mean here? What happened? What do you mean she lifted you up?
Yeah, well, she would just come and play. She would try to mouth the camera and sort of feel what it felt like. I think just touch it and be tactile. And then at times she went underneath me and then just rose up, and there was nowhere I could go. I didn't want to touch her. I always try not to touch any marine life, really any wildlife, if I can help it. And yeah, but she's such a big animal, like this table. If this table just rose up underneath you, or twice the width of the table, you can't do anything. I was just on her head. I tried to gently get off of her head and push away to back away from her, but she made the choice to just lift me up like that, go under me, and then rise up and pick me up out of the water, which was one of the most incredible moments I could have imagined. Yeah, it's really cool.
Was that scary at any point, or was that just fun straight from the off?
Yeah, the only thing I was nervous about, she had some little teeth coming in. She's a young one, so she just had some teeth poking in, and I thought, I don't want her to, because she kept trying to not bite, but mouth my arm and camera, and I thought if she snags one of those on my rash guard, and I try to pull away and it scares her or scares me, or if it pokes me and I jerk, I don't want her to panic, because she could easily kill you on accident. She could, smash you with her jaws. She could swim away and hit you with her tail. That's how they kill things if they want to. They'll smash them with their tail. So I was only, 10% nervous that I could get something snagged on one of her teeth. But for the most part, it was just pure exhilaration. It was just so fascinating to have this animal so curious about me and lifting me out of the water. And, and it wasn't just once. It was 5 or 6 times over the course of that month. And it was the same whale that I'd seen in 2019 with Mark a couple of times. Mm-hmm. So, the whole thing was really, really special. Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
And what does a whale feel like?
Yeah, it's an interesting feeling, their skin. It's quite rubbery feeling, and they're harder than you would think, because they have a lot of blubber on the outside. But where she was touching me was with her head, and the skin is pulled quite tight on the head. And you can tell there's this fat layer, but it's remarkably hard. But it was amazing. I was trying not to touch her, but I was on her, so I had no choice. But yeah, it was fascinating to sort of feel what her skin and the structure under her skin and her face felt like. Yeah, it was really it was a very intimate experience.
And how do you kind of figure out who's who? Are there any particular body markings or things that you look for to be able to differentiate whales?
Yeah, if you can, with sperm whales, if you can see their tail, because their tail is like a fingerprint. It's sort of sad, but their tails are marked. They get bitten by pilot whales and false killer whales, 2 members of the blackfish family, and they get unique scars on their tails from being bitten and having flesh removed from these blackfish. So if you can see the tail, almost immediately who is who. But some whales, especially the ones you get to know better, that are more familiar, you just know from looking at them. You just know, well, that's Pinchy, and that's Fingers, and that's Digit, and that's Dolores, and Can Opener. And, they have marks on their face or unique markings on the dorsal fin, or, Can Opener has 3 little scratches on the side of her face. So those ones that you see a lot, who I have seen many times, I would recognize straight out. Other whales, I might have to look closely at the tail to just see, like, what are the markings on the tail? And then if you really aren't that familiar, you can get a photo of the tail. And then the Dominican Sperm Whale Project has done a great job of cataloging all the whale tails. And you can get the book out and be like, oh, okay, I see that's, Virgo or whoever.
Mm. And the film itself, so this particular whale, she was called Dolores, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And when you have an intimate relationship like that, or an understanding with an animal like that, is obviously incredibly unique. And you, in the film, you wanted to use that to kind of discover more about their feeding behavior. What was your plan with that?
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of the being in this field is, the technology moves on. I was part of the film shoot for Blue Planet 2 in Dominica when we were trying to put suction cup cameras on sperm whales. But the technology in 2016 wasn't good enough to get lights on the cameras. And sperm whales will only tolerate a certain amount of weight. And so we put a camera on, and if it was too big, they would just go to another whale and knock it off. And the suction cups would come loose and it would float back to the surface. So you have this real delicate balance of how much weight can we put in there. And, the more weight that goes into the lights, the less weight that you can have in the battery or in the camera, so you get worse quality. So the balance, the tech didn't allow it in 2016. By the time we did Chasing Ocean Giants in 2019, the tech had moved on and we were able to get very light cameras with physical lights on them. And the tech moved on a bit more when we then got in 2021 to Patrick and the Whale. So the idea with Patrick and the Whale, with Dolores, I thought, well, this is the best opportunity in the world to take this camera and place it behind the jaw. If I see Dolores and she lifts me up on her head and comes over and mouths me, I can just gently, without bothering her, because she likes to be touched, just place it next to her jaw. That was the whole goal of taking that camera back, because the only other way that cameras had been placed on whales at that point in time was with a carbon fiber pole standing on the boat, and you just put it on the top of the head on the little 10% of the whale that comes above the surface. You just put the camera on.
Mm-hmm.
But we'd seen that angle now a whole bunch. And I wanted to always try to strive to do new and different and learn more about these animals in different ways. And I thought, well, I could be the only person in the world with an opportunity to just, because I have this whale that likes me to touch her, to place this camera and get entirely new insight into how they feed and how the squid goes in the mouth. Do they use the lower jaw? There's lots of big questions about that. I mean, there's 2 sperm whales in Dominica. One's missing its lower jaw entirely, still completely normal body weight. So somehow that whale is eating without a lower jaw at all, like with, so it's maybe they just suck the squid right in their mouth. That whale is either doing that or other whales are killing squid and giving it to her. Either one is possible. Mm-hmm. But, we would learn a lot more about how they feed and eat if someone could get a camera with lights just behind the jaw. So that was the hope. But as you know well, when you go try to film animals, they don't always get the script and decide to follow it. So when we went out there with the camera, as you see in the film, Dolores had some of her own ideas of how that was going to go. And yeah.
Well, it's fascinating actually because Dolores ended up leaving the area for a while, and it's something I had no idea happened. You in the movie you show these huge males come into the area, and effectively they do these massive clicks, and it draws all the sperm whales in that area towards these massive males, and then they just follow them. Do they know why they do that?
They're like the Pied Piper. When those big males come in, every sperm whale, pretty much, because these are female resident pods, every sperm whale follows that big male. And the life cycle of big male sperm whales, I don't believe it's ever been told in a natural history documentary, because it is so difficult to follow and understand. So the way that works, you're gonna have to cut some of this, but the way it works is young males are born into a family unit, all females and young males. Once a male turns 13, 14, 15, he's kicked out of the family unit. He's ostracized. So this is really interesting because perhaps for hundreds of thousands of years, those females pass along knowledge of their environment, and they spend their whole life, those sperm whales, as far as we know, in the Eastern Caribbean, in the Grenada Basin. And those females tell each other, hey, here's where there's good squid, here's where it's dangerous, here's where it gets shallow, and that knowledge gets passed on maybe for hundreds of thousands of years. We don't know how long they've been there. Mm-hmm. So this male that only has that knowledge is suddenly kicked out and told, Go places you've never been before in your whole life. Leave the pod and get out of mom's basement and move. And there was a whale there years ago in Unit A, you still see him once in a while, called Alan. Um, and the scientists were calling him Angry Alan because you'd see Unit A here socializing, and then way over here you'd see Alan slapping his tail, breaching, really upset. And he'd swim over to the family and they'd leave. And they were very clearly saying, Alan, move on, get out of mom's basement, get a job, go leave the family unit. It's really scary for Alan because he's now going to swim places that he's never been before in his whole life for the first time ever. And he's had nobody to tell him about any of this. So the real mystery then, Alan leaves. And here's what we don't understand, and I hope one day we do. Somehow, Alan, who's never been out of the Eastern Caribbean, goes off into waters unknown. And he finds 7, 8, 9, 10 other Allens from other resident clans. Now, their clique can travel a long ways, but it can't travel hundreds of miles. How in the world does Alan link up with other ostracized teenage males? How do they find each other? But they do, and they form this bachelor pod of teenagers. And all through their 20s, they're together. So he, again, is not alone. He's, again, has a family of sorts, this bachelor pod of non-breeding age young males. And then they spend their whole life together, right? 15 years, maybe. And then after spending their whole life with other whales, right, from their family unit right into their bachelor pod, around 30 or so, the bachelor pod breaks up, and that whale is then solitary for the rest of its life, from 30 to 80. And they start migrating to the poles. So the big lone males are all in the poles. And every once in a while, they swim alone to the equatorial waters, stay sometimes only 2-3 days, breed with as many females as they can, go back. Weird life for these guys. But when they come in, when one of those big males comes in, all the females in the area go to that male. And we think, we don't know, but we think he breeds with as many of them as are of the age and willing and not already pregnant and such. And then, he leaves. And I think what's happening there is they don't always know when he's just milling around and when he's leaving. So he will sometimes suck them all offshore for 3-4 days and there's no whales because I think they're probably following him, thinking he's going up and down the island and doing whatever he does. And then it takes him a few days to realize, oh gosh, we're 100 miles, 200 miles away and he's out of here. Let's turn around and go home. You know?
But also, like these big males, they are massive and they're also really pale. I didn't realize, I was doing a bit more reading before this talk, and I didn't realize that sperm whales were the genuine inspiration for Moby Dick. There was an actual massive, pale, lone sperm whale, which is the basis of that novel.
Yeah, I mean, big old male sperm whales are often really white. I think they start to lose pigment generally, but they also battle with each other and they're covered in scratches that removes the pigment as well. And the older they get, the more battles they've had and the more pigment's been removed. But that's not the only reason. They also just somehow seem to lose coloration, maybe from spending a lot of time in the poles. Who knows? Humans, obviously, now this is a multi-generational evolutionary thing, became pale when we went to the poles over multiple generations, but maybe there's some link. Who knows why? As they get older, they start to lose pigment and spend more time in the poles and get whiter and whiter. But yeah, it's a real thing. They get very white. And it's, they might be double the length of these females, but they're like 5 times the weight. The girth and mass is incredible how big these old males get.
Now, how big are they?
They get to 80 feet, but they must be, 100,000 pounds or something. I should know that, but I don't. They get really, really massive. Yeah, and they got big teeth. Fascinating animals. And oddly, very hard to get close to. They're very shy, these big males. But yeah, it's really gratifying when you can get one to swim next to you.
Well, and and Dolores had moved off with one of these large males.
Yeah.
And then, fortunately, there was another whale which you had a similar relationship with.
Yeah. Can Opener is a whale that I had known much, much longer than I knew Dolores. And Can Opener displayed some similar characteristics to Dolores when she was Dolores's age. When Can Opener was much younger, she would come lay next to the boat, sometimes spend an hour behind the swim step hanging out. She was really quite curious. And then she had a calf and became less curious, which is interesting. I mean, you know, sometimes in our industry, you think of anthropomorphizing as a dirty word, but thankfully that's sort of gone out of fashion now. We've kind of accepted, hey, big-brained mammals living on planet Earth probably have a lot in common, and if it looks like mating, it's probably mating. If it looks like loneliness, it's probably loneliness.
Yeah.
And so that's the same, I think, in sperm whale culture. There's a lot of things that they look like things that humans do, probably because they are, and their lives have a lot of parallels to ours.
And you did end up getting the tag on the side of Can Opener,
Yeah.
and you could see in the footage of her diving down.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, it was a whole different angle. We saw some different things. We saw the, calf joining as she was resurfacing, and which actually knocked the tag sideways. But yeah, it was very interesting to see a different angle than just having the camera on the top of the head. So in some ways, that was a success. Yeah, it was interesting to get a new perspective on that.
And for me, it's an amazing thing to see, you next to the animal. That really gives it perspective for me, to realize even though these are younger animals, particularly Dolores, she's a young animal, but she's massive.
Yeah,
And those kind of documentaries that show people and animals having these interactions. I mean, you were talking about big brains. Yeah, I've seen it with a lot of animals I filmed, and you can just draw parallels. I mean, almost to every level of intelligence, if that's how you want to mark it. With the animals that we're filming, you see them when they're sad. It's so clearly, it's clearly a thing. They're upset. We had a similar thing with a puma. We were filming a puma for 5 weeks. She knew full well we were there. And she would happily leave her month and a half old cubs with us about 20 meters away. And then she would go and hunt. And she would go and hunt all day.
wow.
And then she would come back. She would look at us. She'd look around. She'd do a tiny little contact call. And outrun, the cubs would run out from this bush, and she would sit there and she would nurse them, and then she would chill, then she'd have a nap.
Yeah.
And she knew full well.
It looked like trust, and it probably was trust.
Yeah, she knew that we weren't out to do them any harm, and she knew that probably us being there was going to stop something else coming over and messing around with her little ones. And so, yeah, I totally believe that, there are going to be those connections. Do you have any other whales or any other marine animals that you have like a target or a plan to film or do or research?
Yeah, sure. I'm working on a project with spinner dolphin superpods at the moment. So just learning about them, recording their calls, recording their behavior. We're not talking 100 animals, we're talking like 5,000 animals in one megapod, and trying to understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, what motivates them, trying to film them, of course, in unique ways from angles that no one's ever seen before, which has been successful so far. What that will become, I'm not sure. You may see that on the big screen sometime, or on a TV show. But yeah, a lot of times I go out and do these things, well, like with the killer whale footage. And I'm just doing it. Well, this is with Patrick and the whale as well. We had a lot of footage already because I was just out hanging out with sperm whales and spending time with them, and filming some of it, and then it became a movie. So what will happen with this dolphin project, I'm not sure yet. Eventually it will probably be broadcast somewhere, but even if it's not, it's something I enjoy doing and trying to learn and figure things out. So yeah,
it's a fascinating I've spoken to a lot of people in this industry, and I've heard a lot of stories, but your story, the twists and turns and how you've got to where you are, it's awesome to hear. And are there any kind of words of, I like to ask people, do they have any advice for their younger selves? And yeah, if you could go back and speak to your younger self, what kind of advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I think a big one is I would tell myself not to worry quite so much. I've had times in my life where I was pretty stressed about things, pretty worried about things. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's with other life events, and things. Thankfully, and maybe it's luck, I don't know, but things just tend to work out. And there were that, and I think to try to live in the moment. It's very hard, I think, and this happens in the wildlife film industry as well, where you think, well, I'm going to work really, really hard in school, and then I'm going to get a job at one of these production companies. And then I'm going to work really, really hard as a researcher so that I can be an AP. And I'm going to really, really hard as an AP. So, and it's almost like, well, I'm going to relax and have fun when I become an AP. And then you become an AP. Well, I'm going to work really, really hard because I want to be a producer. And then after that, I can relax and enjoy this career and this job because it's a pretty fantastic profession. Then I'm going to be a producer and I'm going to really work hard and try to impress everybody just so that I can be a series producer. Well, I'm going to be a series, and then you realize like, you're in it right now. Like there's no like if you're not having fun and enjoying your life right now because you're waiting to have fun or relax or enjoy it at some future moment, that moment's never going to come, right? You got to it's today. It's now. You've got, anybody listening even who's not even not in the industry is alive, is on planet Earth, is surrounded by a lot of spectacular things. Like you better enjoy every day. And as we were talking earlier, you don't know what happens. We've unfortunately had a lot of people who had some unexpected circumstances happen, and you gotta live in the moment, and it's very hard to do that sometimes. To think, okay, I'm gonna be happy after this next milestone, or this next milestone, or this next milestone. And even in our industry, if you're waiting to be an exec, you're probably in your 50s.
If you're
Like,
lucky.
you've missed a lot of life on the way, waiting to enjoy this career and enjoy this profession and enjoy this journey until this milestone, and then it'll be the next one, it'll be the next one. Like, you got to enjoy life now and be happy with where you are, and see the great things. So yeah, I think I would know this guy. He hadn't done anything of note at the time. I said, yeah, sure, give me a call. Sent me an email. So he called me, and we talked for 2 hours. Seemed like a really nice guy. And I said, listen, you sound like a nice guy. The film had nothing to do with me. He just wanted some pointers on where to film blue whales. Wasn't going to ask me to film them. Wasn't just wanted some help with his film. I said, sure. And then I said, you sound like a nice guy. If you really want to make a blue whale film, I'm going to be going to photograph and swim with blue whales in a month in Sri Lanka. Why don't you just come along? Just come along. The boat's already paid for. I got some friends coming. You can just hang out, join on the boat. You're going to learn a shit ton about blue whales if that's what your goal is. He's like, wow, that's great. Yeah, I'll come along. So he did. Came along, enjoyed his time. We got to know each other over the course of the 7, 8 days he was on the boat with me. And then after that, he said, I still want to make a film about blue whales, but you're kind of an interesting guy, and you got this interesting backstory. You were a lawyer, and now you do these adventure things. And, well, how about I pitch a series about you and your adventures, and you can, like, be in front of the camera and be involved? And I was like, this never crossed my mind, but go ahead. Sounds fun. So he did. He pitched it to Discovery Channel. Discovery Channel said, we'll take it. That became Chasing Ocean Giants. That guy was James Reed, who came. He then, made My Octopus Teacher and won an Oscar. Then he pitched this Patrick and the Whale film that came out. And, I think I'd like to tell that story because it's similar to Joe Tredenick from the BBC calling me and asking for footage. When James called me, this unknown guy, I could have not given him the time of day. I could have given him 10 minutes, but I gave him 2 hours. And then I invited him to come with me to Sri Lanka. And then I became a wildlife TV show host and now have a movie out that has my name in the title, which is all very exciting. But how did that happen? I didn't go to film school. I didn't go to media school. I didn't try to be a host or a presenter. It happened because I was just nice to someone I didn't know. And then that led me on this other journey. Similar to how I was just nice when Joe called and wanted killer whale footage. And then next thing I know, I'm working on Blue Planet 2 as a cameraman. I was just nice when James called and asked for help and advice. And next thing I know, I have my own series on Discovery Channel and then onward from there. So, I think the moral there is clear.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's an awesome place, and I think what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you coming and chatting with me. And hopefully we'll be back again and we'll be talking about the spinner dolphins.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks a lot for having me. It's great to see you again.
No worries, dude.